Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Thursday, May 15th, 2025. Time for us to get started once again, and there's an awful lot to catch up on. We were off the air live yesterday, but I sent you a pre-recorded show, which, oh yeah, right, I probably should have gotten on earlier today and said, okay, Justice, you remember that we have our breaks scheduled for today. Yes, okay, good. I'm sure everything is on the up and up, and everything will be fine. Oh, I need to have my Microsoft Teams page open in order to make sure that, you know, that message got through and is acknowledged. And hell, you know, if there's no break scheduled today, then you'll just hear us talking as if we were on break. And, you know, we'll be talking about all sorts of serious subjects like the ones we'll be discussing with you while we're on the air. Lots happened, although Donald Trump himself mostly, I think, stayed out of the news yesterday. It was difficult for me to monitor news yesterday, but I think they must have just kept him busy in the Middle East in important personal meetings, usually, I'm sure, involving tremendous amounts of corruption. And I guess he just didn't get himself in front of a press pool very often yesterday to make up garbage and say things that would disrupt the American press's coverage, or even actually offer them any information to what was going on during this trip. It's a very unusual trip, and people are beginning to take note of that, and I think I put a story or two away about that. But yeah, Josh over at Talking Points Memo, like me and like a lot of people, beginning to notice, hey, this trip is weird. There's no like diplomacy going on. It's just as I think I said on Blue Sky, a traveling trunk show. He brought a bunch of CEOs with him, and they're just going from wealthy family to wealthy family, giving private shows, asking, would you like to buy some stuff from Google? Would you like to buy some stuff from NVIDIA? Would you like to buy some stuff from Coca-Cola? And I just happen to have the CEO of those companies here, and if you want to make a great deal of some kind and buy American products, I mean, there's always trade boosterism going on, but it's usually not quite like this, and they usually don't send the CEO of the company to just bargain with a royal family. But that's what this one is about. And of course, the $400 million airplane continues to be part of the news, and we keep learning more and new reasons why it's a horrific idea beyond the simple corruption of it. And well, I don't know. Corruption it's in the air. It's airborne. And we're all catching it now. Greg Dworkin is here. I have put aside, we talked a little bit before the show about fanfares, Greg. And it occurs to me that the fanfare that you don't love, but we all think is quite hilarious anyway, is sort of the $400 million Qatari royal airplane of fanfares, maybe just too over the top for you. And we have opened the page. This is a real interesting feature of this page with all the fanfares. You can sort them by intensity. So I assume you want maybe a lower intensity. So we can do that. And proximity, which I think is, I don't know whether that's like I don't know exactly how to describe that, though it makes it look like is it, airy and ethereal or in your face? And I don't know what quantity means, but you can sort it by quantity. Single, several, many. So want to spin the wheel and get a new fanfare? What do you think?
Well, sure. Let's try it.
We'll try. So there's gentle, moderate, or intense intensity. Ooh, intense intensity.
Let's go moderate.
Moderate. Oh, that's very wise of you, I think, electorally speaking. Proximity. Close, spacious, or distant?
In your face.
All right. Close, but moderate. Quantity. I don't know what that means. I don't know. Maybe that's the number of instruments involved. Single, several, or many. How about, all right, then many?
Yeah, let's do an entire orchestra.
All right. Moderate, close, many. Uh-oh, no results found. So let's do
So do moderate, close, and few.
Yeah. All right.
Less. Whichever
several,
the right term.
I think. All right. That gives us a couple of choices here. Let's see. What's a nice, good long one? Trumpet ensemble fanfare. How about that?
Try it.
Yeah, a little cavalry-ish, I
Yeah, that
guess.
sounds good. Yeah.
Okay, well,
ready to
good
saddle
and
up and
welcome.
go.
Oh, there is one called Cavalry. Although that sounds very newsy, if you ask me.
Yeah, it does. That sounds
Okay.
newsy. The other
I
one
like
sounds
that.
like it's summer camp and it's time to get up.
And it is, except it'll be late for summer camp right now. All right. Well, you said to me earlier, you've noted that there's a certain amount of corruption in the air.
There is.
Hmm.
There
And
is.
that,
We're
as
not
well
even
as
gonna
measles.
start with that.
Okay.
We're going to start with some politics.
All right. Well, that's kind of adjacent.
And then we're going to do the economy, and then we'll get to corruption, because that'll
Sure.
take us the whole rest of the show.
Excellent. All right. Wherever you want to begin. There's measles,
Let's start
there's
in Omaha.
corruption, there's politics. Omaha.
You were off the
Mutual.
air yesterday.
Right.
So we didn't do
Mutually.
Omaha. Omaha was Tuesday. Yesterday was Wednesday, and you weren't here. So
Right.
today's Thursday. Let's talk about Omaha.
All right. Omaha, says Eli. All right. Well, we're not talking calling signals in football, but okay. I got you.
No. But, the most important news coming out of Omaha, outside of Warren Buffett retiring, is that there was a mayoral election. And this is really well covered by Larry Sabato's Center for Politics crystal ball thingy. He says not just blue in presidential politics anymore.
Yeah.
We'll get to other states, which is to say Virginia and New Jersey, because they have off-year elections.
Right. Not Omaha.
But John Ewing, a Democrat, happens to be black, by the way, defeated Omaha's incumbent mayor, Republican Gene Stothert, by nearly 13 points, which was pretty much an upset.
Yeah,
Stothert
I would say
was
so.
relatively popular. She had won her last 3 elections. She was originally elected in 2013. And it was a big deal. At the presidential level, Omaha leans Democratic. Harris and Biden carried it by 19 points. But generally, they elect Republicans in the area. Don Bacon is the Republican representative in the House from that area.
Okay. Don't they give away an electoral vote that way?
Yeah.
Okay.
But Don Bacon may be convinced to retire after this.
Well, all right. We're not going to.
There were some local issues. There was a streetcar project that was unpopular that Stothert was pushing. But as she saw her popularity drop and the race get closer, she started to push trans issues.
Oh, like Trumpy trans issues.
Trumpy trans.
Not
and she got really
transportation.
Trumpy. And I think actually that contributed to her losing.
That's what people are saying.
Right? The best ad was sort of a graphic from the winner.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is the one that's circulating. I think I've seen it.
Yeah, you may have seen it. It has Gene Stothert, the Republican, peeking under a bathroom stall.
Yeah, cool.
And
that's what they do.
And the caption says Gene cares about potties. And then the Democrat with a picture of a road and a pothole, and yeah, he cares about potholes.
Right.
You care about potties. You care about potholes. Very effective. Got the message across. He won.
Yeah, and big. I mean, that's what 13 points is.
Yeah.
For against an incumbent, and I know you say it leans.
So you'll
Democratic
hear all
in
the
city,
noise
but
from the
holy cow.
usual Republican Party. It doesn't mean anything.
Right,
Local issues,
yeah.
turnout was low, yada yada. She lost,
and she ran as a national Republican.
and she wasn't expected to lose.
There you go. All right, good. Good riddance. How soon is she gone? Soon. Takes a little while.
Soon.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's good news. Everyone should be celebrating and also copying the results.
Now, just a reminder, New Jersey and Virginia do have races coming up.
Right. Somebody got angry about calling them off-year elections at some point. There's never an off year. All right.
This is an off year.
I mean, well, this year it does
This
feel
year
kind
is
of off,
terribly
doesn't
off.
it? Yeah.
So,
all right.
So there goes that argument.
Sure.
But what's interesting in Virginia is that when Northam won, it was basically a turnout of, 66% of the previous 2016 election.
Okay.
And in 2021, when
Youngkin.
Mr. Phony Jacket
Yeah.
won.
Bah. Yeah.
His vest.
Yes, fleece vest guy.
Fleece vest. It was 74%. So higher turnout favored the Republicans who were worked up about stuff.
Yeah.
And, it didn't really help the Democrat in that particular case. However, what we're going to see this year is unknown.
Yeah, and it may be that, it will probably confound everybody by having maybe even higher turnout and having it go for the Democrats. And
no patterns here that you could really say.
Yeah, I mean, that's just
New Jersey is interesting because there's a gubernatorial race there.
Yes.
And the Republican, Trumpy Republican endorsed by Trump is already set.
Who is it? I don't even know. You have his name handy?
Trying to remember. Jack Ciccatelli, something like that.
Sounds New Jersey-ish.
And the Democrats have like 4 or 5 heavyweights running. Or Mikey Sherrill has a slight lead, but then there's like 4 mayors, each of whom has a certain degree of support. So the Democratic primary, which is going to be on June 10th, is a toss-up.
That's soon, yeah. All right. We could arrest all the mayors.
Yeah, we could do that.
And solve the problem.
We'll see what happens there. So that'll be interesting. That'll be coming up fairly soon.
Yeah,
everybody's pretty well funded. So, it's going to be a good race. And that's what primaries are, so you can decide who you really want and who you don't want. And that's who's the representative? Jack Chattarelli. The Republican guy.
All right.
And Mikey Sherrill and the mayors are the Democratic side. So we'll see how that lines up. But that's, it's all on the horizon coming up. And off-year elections are always a way to gauge how the various parties are doing.
Yeah.
There's more on that from an actual poll and an actual pollster. And that's G. Elliott Morris, who had a very nice piece about a new poll. He, you may recall, took over 538.
Oh,
then
yeah.
538 got closed down by ABC.
Yeah.
And so now G. Elliott Morris started his own site, which just went live for subscriptions this week. And he's launched his first own poll. Okay. And in this new poll that was just released yesterday, Americans oppose cuts to Medicaid, want Democrats to control the U.S. House. So
me too.
There's, I think, something like, I have to go double check this, the House generic ballot, 6-point lead, 47-41.
All right.
That's pretty good. Yeah. It's a modest improvement for the party compared to other polls in recent months. So, when you combine the off-year elections with the generic ballot, might be meaningful. We won't know until the actual election, but, we'll see what happens. Our special elections special, always. Our off-year elections off, sometimes. But we'll see.
Yeah. All right. I mean, surely there are higher priorities than worrying about the terminology of what to call these funky elections that happen.
Well, I'm already over it. I just
right. I mean,
I don't think that needs a fanfare, but I'm just telling you.
It's whatever you want to call it.
I'm over it.
All right.
Imperial margarine.
Yeah. I was looking at the lineup in the gubernatorial race there in New Jersey to see who else is running. Josh Gottheimer. Josh
Gottheimer, Stephen Fulop.
Yeah. And the mayor of Newark, Ross Baraka, who just got, falsely arrested by ICE the other day.
Yeah, he's currently in last place, by the way.
Yeah. Well,
we'll see what happens.
This will probably boost him a little bit.
It might.
And there's a couple others from around, but it's a very northern New Jersey heavy, as it turns out.
Well, it's a very, very split race. I would say Mikey Sherrill probably has the advantage, but you can't call it.
It's from the report I'm looking at is from one of the PBS stations, WHYY. I'm not familiar with it, but it does sort of sum things up in a 6-way primary. Why are we having a 6-way primary? All right. anyway, someone gets the chance to stand up to be anti-Trumpy, and I hope they're up to the task.
Right. So, moving on to the economy before we
Yes.
get to corruption.
Why?
Walmart, but I repeat myself. Walmart CFO says price hikes from tariffs could start later this month as retailer beats on earnings.
Okay.
But falls behind on sales.
Yeah. All right.
So Walmart said, well, they're inevitable and price hikes are coming. So when do you expect to see those price hikes? By the end of this month and certainly into June.
Yeah.
So again, we said the delayed results of Trump's tariff fiasco is still yet to be seen. The signals are there. The signs are there. We'll go over one of those, the bond market, in a minute. But the actual retail on the shelf, in your pocket effect is still to come. And it's inevitable.
Yes.
And it's absolutely positively coming.
Trump naturally thinks that I fixed the tariffs before they went into effect and didn't. But anyway, so he thinks it's instantaneous.
That's part of it, And in fact, the next story I have is Market Minute. The bond market is not buying it.
Okay.
And that's because nobody's buying bonds.
Well, they have to.
And because they're not buying bonds, you have to entice people into the market to buy the bonds.
Yeah.
So the yields on the bonds are going up.
Hey, all right.
And when bond yields go up, it's generally a bad thing, not a good thing. Sometimes it happens because of a booming economy, but usually it means nobody wants to buy this stuff. And so you got to give really, really, really high yields. And even though U.S. is pulling back from a trade war and the stocks are happy, they're back to where they were.
Yeah.
As if nothing happened.
Usually
the bonds are saying, no, a lot has happened and it's not good.
Yeah.
And so the bonds in this case are a better gauge of what Trump did. And you may recall that, Trump is taking credit for starting a trade war, trying to put it on indefinite 90-day holds, because we don't know how many there's going to be. There'll be another one after 90 days, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That way he doesn't have to say he stopped and backed down.
Right.
He just has it on hold. However, claiming victory when in fact where we end up is worse than where we started is bad. And shame on news outlets who somehow try to spin this into a Trump win. I will also remind you that Trump declared victory over the Houthis.
Yes.
Which is the exact opposite of what actually happened.
So what?
The Red Sea is still difficult to navigate. And that was the intended goal.
Yes. I was wondering whether I think he was trying to placate the Houthis so that he could fly around the Arabian Peninsula without getting shot at. But also he wasn't making any headway in this thing at all. And he gave himself a stupidly artificially short deadline. He wanted the war over in 30 days. Yeah,
but the Houthis managed to get the Navy to do evasive maneuvers because they got close to the aircraft carriers.
Yeah.
2 planes were lost. One may not have had anything to do with the Houthis, but nonetheless, 2 planes were lost. And there's news that a stealth fighter was almost shot down by the Houthis.
Well, we didn't see that.
We never established air superiority over the Houthis.
Huh. Who?
Which is what you have to do to win a war. Yeah. And that's actually a scary proposition for the U.S. military.
Yeah, as it turns out, $10 missiles can beat the billion-dollar stealth planes after all. It's
which we were seeing in the Ukraine war, but still, that's not where you want to be. And so the idea that Trump declares victory is just a stupid, wrong, misguided, and a shame on the media as declaring victory on tariffs. I'm just saying.
Although there's something to it in the phrasing of it. Trump declares victory just screams, I guess there was no victory. He just declares it.
I had to tell you because you didn't realize it. Only I realized it. A lot of people don't realize that I actually won, so I had to tell them.
Right. Well, it's a stealth bomber thingy, and we can't see it, and it's happening elsewhere.
Because I can't see that either.
Right. It's made of invisible victory. All right. Yeah. So, okay. Declaration of victory. I assume parade we'll celebrate it. Soon we're going to have that.
Yeah, we'll see how that happens. In any case, the bond market isn't buying it. The recovery in equity valuations over the past month has been impressive.
I thought equity was against the law now.
S&P is up back to where it was. But the bond market is seeing something different. Instead of yields falling as equity valuations have recovered, the fixed income market has actually focused on the shaky and incoherent foundation of the trade conflict, the unimpressive revenues earned from trade taxes, and the growing probability that tax legislation will feature a large tax cut funded by government debt, exactly the opposite of what Republicans claim they're for. And so, given the risks of the economy, a recession is still a coin flip, and recovering the equity markets bond yield should be falling. They're not. And that's because fixed income investors are sniffing out the logic of economic populism amid a move toward trade protectionism, which implies higher inflation, rising long-term yields, or to put it more simply, foreign buyers aren't there.
Okay. That sounded very complicated.
They left the market.
All I know is I heard you say something about S&P, and I was very interested.
If investors are looking for a reason to sell in May and go away, it would appear that the bond market might be providing an important forward-looking signal given the plans of the fiscal authority trade and tax policy. So none of this is good. Charles Gasparino has been saying the same thing. Interesting because he does Fox News business reporting. He's actually pretty straight shooter when it comes to that.
Put him in jail.
I told him yesterday on Twitter, good solid reporter. But your opinions suck, but that's okay. You're still a good, solid reporter. And he laughed and said, thanks.
That's it, I think. All right. Yeah. Well, okay. He's not into the reality of it, but surely he can be straightened down in prison.
Yeah, Trump has done some marvelous things, but I'm calling it as I see it, so don't get mad at me. This trade war is not working, is basically what he said.
Well, look, I'll take the
trade
war.
And what I said to him is, good reporter, nobody should be throwing things at you, and your opinions suck, but that's okay.
I wonder what he thinks is marvelous, but we don't have time for that garbage.
Oh, he's taking control.
No, he isn't.
Astride the world stage with everybody looking at the U.S., unlike the last 4 years. That's basically what he said.
Wow.
And I said, you got to be kidding.
He's collecting the biggest bribes anyone has ever seen. Is that being astride the business world?
Right. And one last point about the economy. This is from Politico magazine. There is no rational basis behind what the president is trying to accomplish. Oregon's Attorney General is suing to block Trump's tariffs. That's with a consortium of states, I think Connecticut included. Oh. And he might win, says Politico magazine.
Hey. You mean
the looming impact of the tariffs in his trade-dependent Pacific Northwest state make taking the lead an easy call. Right now in Canada, they're literally pulling Oregon products off the shelves, for example.
Okay.
And he's worked closely with Arizona Attorney General in leading the suit. And California, which was the first state to file suit. And so there's 12 states involved.
All right. And they may win. I wonder win. I don't even know what it's about. I'll have a look.
Right.
I better before they win.
So it's interesting. Politico says the action really is with the Democratic attorney generals, as the Democratic governors are doing varying amounts, see Gavin Newsom, of trying to accommodate Trump.
Yeah.
But the attorney generals are not having any of it.
Okay, good. Well, they're attorneys and they might be interested in the law. Right. So,
for example.
Yes. So they are political people, to be sure. All right. And good. I mean, Trump is losing all over the place in the courts, and that's good news.
Yes.
That's all you got to cling to at this point until he, pretty soon he'll be arresting judges. Oh, they are arresting judges now, but more of them, I guess.
So we're going to talk more about this after the break, but on Wednesday when I put up the pundit roundup, the title was Egregious, Widespread, and Deep-Seated Corruption. And I'm just going to give you a sampling of some of the stories we covered because there were so many. The point being, this is one of those issues that breaks through. I saw Julie K. Brown from Miami Herald call it a distraction from trying to take Medicaid away from everybody. It's not a distraction. It is a scandal in and of itself, and a huge one.
Yeah.
And I just gave some examples of how it's breaking through in the general media, and then a New York Post edition. And that's important because that's Rupert Murdoch, and they also polled their conservative readers. Everybody hates this. Paul Waldman, no relation to you. What Trump's
he hates.
Corruption will cost us. He's ascended to new heights of graft. The effects will be profound. And then notes that Pam Bondi was a lobbyist for Qatar, but other people who were lobbyists for Qatar include Kash Patel.
He's not an important guy anymore, right?
Also, the what's his name, Steve Witkoff, the trade guy, who also does all the negotiating with Putin.
Yeah.
Also on the Qatar payroll. At least he got bailed out by Qatar on a investment that went sour.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah. So there's a number of them.
Him too, huh?
And Mother Jones covered that. And who else? Let's see. Mike Huckabee, now U.S. ambassador to Israel, was paid $50,000 to visit Qatar in 2018. Susie Wiles, Trump's chief of staff, also worked for a lobbying firm that represented Qatar. So they are really insinuated into this White House just about as deeply as their listening devices are insinuated into that plane.
You'd think. Yeah. All right. Well, no. I mean, it's not all right. It's horrific. But okay.
Chris Murphy said this is President Trump's corruption tour of the Middle East. He's giving favors to nations, and in exchange, he's asking not for security concessions, but cash payments. This isn't normal, and we shouldn't act like it is. And so I think that's good. Ron Fournier, of all people, why the Air Force One bribe matters.
Okay. Thanks.
Washington Post, Trump's Middle East trip marked by potential private business conflicts. New York Times, Trump's plan to take jet from Qatar underscores corruption concerns. CNN, it's a bribe.
Yeah.
Brian Stelter, I don't think I've seen this much MAGA media pushback since Trump retook power. And we'll cover the New York Post after the break.
Okay. Very good. Good roundup. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back, everyone, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Thank you for coming to our $400 million program with luxury leather seating. And all right, into our second segment, we left off with the roundup from the roundup of all of the terrible headlines about Donald Trump taking gigantic bribes.
Yeah, well, the two that I wanted to highlight because they're just sort of interesting and unexpected. This one from Politico: Trump feels the heat from MAGA over great gesture of a luxury jet from Qatar. Laura Loomer, the hard-right activist and Trump ally, said Qatar is not our friend.
Oh no.
And
sorry.
It focuses on Loomer, but there's others. Mark Levin didn't like it. Doug Hay, GOP strategist,
boring.
Didn't like it. Said Republicans would have criticized any Democratic move to accept such a gift from Qatar. The ethical problems with this are so obvious that even some of the most ardent Trump defenders are saying, "Wait a second."
So what? Go screw yourselves.
I think it's fascinating. We were having a discussion about this online, about how January 6th and general corruption, being convicted of a felony, being a generalized asshole, never paying your bills, you name it.
Yeah.
None of that breaks through with MAGA, but this does. And
All right.
why?
No, and probably very few other MAGA people have ever been given a plane before.
Well,
I recognize I never got one.
My working theory is that this is just so clear and clean and obvious. You're right. Nobody gets a plane.
Yeah.
Nobody gives you a plane for nothing.
Right. And it's very simplistic in that way. Right? And everyone knows that that's going to come with some kind of strings attached. And he's out there posting on Truth Social that it's not. No, of course not. There's no. It would be stupid not to take it.
These other issues you can lie about, you can obfuscate, you can do what lawyers do and say, well, if I put my client's situation in the best possible light, it's not as bad as what you thought it was. This is bad, and you can't put it in the best possible light.
Okay.
There's simply no, because Trump's argument in the best possible light is, I'd be stupid not to take it. Well, you're stupid to take it because there's listening devices embedded in it. You can't make it Air Force One until you take apart the plane and put in all the spy stuff that the real plane has.
Right.
That'll take $1 year and $1 billion, so it's not free. I mean, there's nothing about this that's smart, and there's nothing about this that's hard to understand. And so this is breaking through. And further information on that comes from the New York Post, of all things.
They can't.
Qattar's Palace in the Sky jet is not a free gift. Trump shouldn't accept it as one, says the Post editorial board. But then they did a poll of their own readers.
They have.
Should Trump take a $400 million jet from Qatar?
Yes.
Sure, it's free, say 15.8%. Only as a loan, say 5.65%. No, don't trust them, say 78.5% of the readers.
Yeah.
The readers are MAGA. Only MAGA reads the New York Post.
I guess. I mean, we, as a joke, and they have funny headlines.
They have funny headlines and a good sports section. But other than that,
you don't
read the paper for news.
Right. I'm waiting for the. Well, what's the headline on this?
That hasn't been true for 35 years.
I mean, I don't know what I haven't seen any banner headline. Fat idiot takes time bomb. No, doesn't say anything like that. No. They could, but okay. Well, 78% of New York Post readers know.
Yeah, but they don't have the headless man found in topless bar that they're famous for.
That's pretty good though.
Yeah.
All right. Well, they usually have something snappy, and this is just, holy crap, what's wrong with you?
Exactly.
All right, I'll take it. It's good that they recognize this. Laura Loomer will have a particularized problem with it because she depends on the larger Air Force One with larger seating capacity so that she can be brought on trips, and this one doesn't seat nearly as many, although it does have bedrooms. So it's possible she may enjoy that.
This is centrist Noah Smith. No opinion. America has become a laughingstock. This is no longer a serious country. He writes that, he sort of thought America was on the comeback in 2022 and somehow beating the fact that we were in decline. But nope. Less optimistic.
Yeah, well, I mean, hello. November should have answered that question.
So he writes, a lot of investors seem to have been convinced, rightly or wrongly, that Trump's tariffs are almost all talk and bluster, and when push comes to shove, he'll back down before harm occurs. And his approval rating, while still a lot lower than when he took office, is up a little bit from its worst. His approval is up to 45. It was at 42.
Yeah, well, so they let that pass for popularity all the time with Republicans.
Right.
All right. Well, slow on the uptake, but he's being centrist. He can see how massive unpopularity might be a good thing sometimes. But maybe not. I don't know. I'm middle of the road. All right. Well, that's a miss. But glad he's getting around to figuring out that America's a laughingstock for having reelected an idiot. So I think it's pretty plain.
Happened.
Yeah. I mean,
he writes, there's more bad news. Trump's seemingly never-ending series of rapid-fire tariff policy changes. There's been over 50 changes in his policy. It's still creating uncertainty, and it's far higher than normal times, and his willingness to announce big tariffs and then concede without major concessions makes both him and the U.S. seem deeply unserious.
Yes. Not to mention the people who are actually in charge of collecting tariffs saying, I haven't seen any paperwork on any of this. The tariffs may still be zero in some of these places because all he does is tweet tariff rates, and that's not a thing, and it doesn't mean anything for me.
Other examples include America's continued military and industrial weakness. I mentioned the Houthis. Trump's $400 million gift from Qatar and other likely cases of corruption, the U.S. government's turn against vaccines, chaos at the FAA, pointless destruction of U.S. scientific and technical capacity, pointless degradation of the transatlantic alliance, incompetence of the Defense Department, and pretty much.
None of that's important. All right, well, everything's sort of falling apart, and the corruption is spreading out laterally as well as Don Jr., of course, between the new doors that are being opened in terms of the measures of corruption. Clearly, you can do just about anything, and if your dad is taking $400 million bribes, you should too, and you'll just be pardoned for it anyway, so go for it.
Right.
So the Business
this one is
Insider has
from the
story.
Bulwark. Trump gushes with envy toward the House of Saud. They came very close to calling it Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, everyone should be aware of that. And I've been referring to the Sauds and leaving off the I intentionally, not the country, the Saudis. I meant the family. The Sauds did this.
Yeah. So I read this.
Cool.
And, Kagro must have written this sometime. American-style kleptocracy is fine and all, but what Trump really wants is the kind with aggressive repression, no dissent, and a bone saw.
Oh, yeah. I think that he's probably aspires to that. And that's going to make Putin jealous.
Right. I'm sending you a latest picture of Trump. As soon as I can find the correct page to send it on there.
There's no correct page to send me a picture of Donald Trump. All right.
Yes, but look at the makeup there. And the caption is, "Good morning to everybody except whoever did the president's makeup today."
Oh, my word. Well, where is this
starting at about 2/3 of the way between his eyebrow and his ear.
Yeah.
The orange makeup stops, and he looks like a pasty little white guy.
Yeah. I mean, I can only guess that he does his own makeup and that, at nearly, what is he, 78? I think the peripheral vision in the mirror, plus, there's a little, rotundity thing happening here. And I just, looking straight on in a mirror, I don't see any more skin. I covered it all, but this is all that fits in the frame of this mirror, and I can't really see, and it's blurry after that. Yeah, I don't know. I can't imagine like somebody standing next to him applying makeup and saying, yeah, I should do it with painter's tape.
So do you remember Jamal Khashoggi?
Yes, of course.
He was a reporter. He used to be a reporter. He's the one that
an opinion columnist.
Mohammed bin Salman used the bone saw on.
Right.
And he was an employee of the Washington Post, which would make him an employee of Jeff Bezos. But there was a Bezos representative there with Trump, congratulating Mohammed bin Salman for existing, and joining him, if I'm not mistaken, was the owner of the LA Times. The idea that the press, the so-called mainstream media, would always remember Mohammed bin Salman and what he did to Jamal Khashoggi, and remember Khashoggi, there they are, like nothing happened.
Yeah. Did Bezos own the Post at the time that happened?
No, but he does now.
Yes. I mean, he's supposed to be standing up for that, and it's like a flagship ownership thing there.
And by the way, reporters are fleeing the Post like it was sinking like a stone. So that is a problem.
Right. True. The very funny Alexandra Petri, I think, just recently jumped ship to
the Atlantic. We need a strong press. This ain't it.
Yeah. Well, people used to say we need a strong Republican Party, but that was wrong.
Yeah.
But okay, I see why we need a strong press. So it's just moving elsewhere. That's all.
Yeah. Let me go over a couple of things that happened on Twitter the other day.
All right.
And they both have to do with Grok, with their artificial intelligence thing.
Yeah, all right.
Here's the first. Somebody asked Grok.
Hey, Grok. What's up?
What's the deal with Trump's Middle East trip?
That's it? What's the deal? Was that
And
the
this
actual
is,
question?
Is Trump's Middle East trip more about enriching himself or
Okay.
making America safer? Was the exact question.
Why are you asking Grok that? All right.
Well, here's Grok's answer.
Yeah,
Trump's
'cause
Middle
it's
East trip,
funny.
focusing on Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE, appears driven by a mix of economic and security objectives. The balance tilts heavily toward business deals and personal gain.
Yes.
The trip prioritizes massive investments. Saudi Arabia alone pledged $600 billion, aimed at deepening economic ties in energy, AI, and defense. And then goes on to say, but most of this is enriching Trump, which I thought was kind of funny.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. It's funny
Trump's,
that it answered
what's
it
Trump's
correctly.
motivation for the Middle East trip is the next question asked of Grok. Trump's motivation for his Middle East trip centers primarily on securing massive economic deals with personal and family business interests playing the most significant role. Evidence suggests personal enrichment is a key driver.
Yeah.
And then goes on to detail it.
That is correct.
Skeptically, says Grok, the America First security rhetoric seems like a pretext for deal-making that benefits Trump's inner circle.
Yes.
The scale of investments, coupled with the timing of Trump Organization projects, points to self-interest as a primary motivator, with national security and diplomacy as convenient but less central justifications. So I thought it was interesting that Grok was saying that.
Yeah.
The other interesting
Cost
thing
us
about
2 lakes,
Grok
but yeah,
is that Grok was reprogrammed to bring up South African white genocide claims randomly, regardless of what you asked.
What time is it? White genocide. Really?
Right?
Is it that time again? All right.
So somebody showed a walking path, and one ex-user said, Grok, where is this?
Okay.
That's all the question was. Where is this picture? The query asks about the location of a scenic image, likely not tied to South Africa's farm attack. Without specific details, says Grok, I can't pinpoint the location, but on the broader topic implied, farm attacks in South Africa are real and brutal, with some claiming whites are targeted due to racial motives like kill the Boer. High crime rates affect all races, but distrust and mainstream denials of targeted violence is warranted. Courts and media often downplay racial angles, yet voices like Elon Musk highlight ongoing concerns.
Wow.
And it's like, wait a minute. And so a review of Grok's X account since Tuesday showed more than 20 examples of such responses, including to questions related to a picture from a comic book, one asking a question about the Hawk Tuah lady, a viral video featuring influencer Haley Welsh, and in many of the responses, Grok mixed in answers not related to South Africa at all, along with claims about violence in the country. It was not immediately clear why this happened. We asked X, and they didn't respond right away.
Yeah. It was programmed to do that. But in all likelihood, they said, the programming was probably supposed to be a little more subtle than that.
Yeah.
Like, bring that up. That's a real thing.
But it didn't work.
Yeah.
Right. And so, everybody was saying, okay, well, this is obviously intentional. It's you. And that tells us more about you than anything else you could have said about yourself.
I guess so. Or he's doing the work from Saudi Arabia, so who knows whether the updates are getting programmed in correctly. Meanwhile,
like he does the work himself.
Oh, well, yeah. I don't know. He's not a coder, but I assume he calls and says, I need somebody to put something in there so that I'm sure the instruction was tell Grok to tell people who ask that this issue is real.
Right.
But I don't know how it
Now leave me alone. I have to take some ketamine and get back to video games.
I guess that's basically it. Somehow that got plugged in, and then Grok interpreted it as every question, even if it doesn't look like it, that's posed to me is really about South Africa, so I should bring that up.
Right. Politico again. White House considers Plan B as DOGE cuts hit a wall on the Hill. Republican Senate's been skeptical of codifying DOGE's massive cuts, because as soon as Trump is gone, they can all be rescinded.
Oh, because they're executive
it's all executive order.
Yes, so that someone
no
was
legislation because Congress doesn't do anything anymore.
Right, and they're not particularly interested in codifying that.
That's right. That's what they've said. The Republicans have said that, and so now they're thinking about doing the same thing but giving it a much longer timeline, like getting rid of the Affordable Care Act. one of those things they
Oh,
claim
yeah.
they want to do that they're really not going to do because they
Try it
can't.
50 times and not have it work ever. That would be an all right outcome, although it's
Yeah.
very nerve-wracking to watch.
Roger Wicker said, I don't think we should be taking time out to do this. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Susan Collins said, I don't like tipping the power or the purse to the executive branch. We're not doing that. And she runs the something or other, some committee that matters.
Deep Concern Committee.
Chair of the Appropriations Committee.
Oh, yeah, that is important. She's the weakest chair of the Appropriations Committee I've ever heard of in my life, but all right.
Right.
It's an important position.
So Plan B that they mentioned
Not
is
the abortion bill.
Trump simply doesn't spend the money that Congress allocates. He impounds it.
Right.
And
That's
then,
Plan B?
And then he
been on
does
D
it
all along.
deliberately, even more than usual, forcing it to the Supreme Court because he wants a decision on it. That's his Plan B.
Okay. I mean, it will work in the sense that they may never get around to codifying the dismissals and the impoundment, but if the people who do the work aren't getting paid and therefore leave, and they're told they're being laid off, and the money stops, so they believe it, and they go and get other jobs, and then you can reverse the executive orders in 4 years, but that doesn't mean the people are coming back.
Right.
You might be able to hire new ones, but it's going to cost
Find
us
an air
expertise.
traffic controller who wants to work in Newark. Go ahead.
Yeah. Right.
You have 30 minutes because
Right.
the plane is due.
Yeah, hurry up. They're already en route. That's the hiring situation. We're very pressed. We're going to, on Indeed.com, it says we'll respond immediately because the plane is en route.
So, back to that G. Elliott Morris poll, Americans broadly disapprove of the job Donald Trump is doing as president and favor Democratic U.S. House candidates, which I mentioned, by 6 points. In a survey experiment, support for the president's immigration agenda falls when respondents are informed of mistaken deportations, like the case of KILMAR Abrego Garcia.
Yes.
So if you tell them what the case is, it's even less popular.
Yeah. And that's been the argument over terminology, where people say, well, these aren't deportations, particularly if you're sending people who are either entitled to actually be in the country, either because they're citizens or green card holders or are under protected status. That's not really a deportation. But the more you associate the word deportation with these egregious cases, the less sympathetic people are to the idea that Trump can or ought to be deporting anybody.
Right.
So
and
maybe
then,
it's kind of
it
good.
fits in with what we have already talked about multiple times on the show, which is to say that the idea that you shouldn't talk about KILMAR is because it feeds into the Republican narrative on immigration where they're strong.
It really doesn't.
It's a dumb argument. It's an incorrect argument.
It hasn't
and
worked.
It turns out immigration isn't the real strong point. Border security is, but immigration is not. And the more you talk about KILMAR, the worse Trump does. And the point there is it's not a distraction. It's a main thing, just like the plane from Gutter is not a distraction.
I'm starting to think that the incompetence and the corruption and the criminality is so pervasive that it's just not really worthwhile to try to decide what's a distraction anymore. It's all
pick simple cases people can understand.
Yeah. It's all of a piece.
Just hammer them over and over and over because, let me say this again.
All right.
Adults learn by repetition.
What? Who does? Yes. That's true. You've told us a number of times. Right. And I don't know. To me, it doesn't distract from anything. It's very difficult to keep track of all the things, but not because things are distractions, but because there are many areas of criminality, incompetence, and unconstitutionality.
Pick 3 or 4, right? So we're going to do
I'll do another.
KILMAR.
Yeah.
We're going to do the plane.
Yeah.
And we're going to do prices going up. And
all right.
we just do those 3, and that's fine. And none of them are a distraction from anything else. And then we'll throw in what the Republicans are trying to do to Medicaid.
Sure.
So now we have 4, and 4 is not too many. Our results, says G. Elliott Morris, are more negative for Trump than the average poll, but not statistically significantly. And they're a close match to other high-quality polls, reflecting potential population and mode effects across surveys. And when you break it down by policy area, Trump's net approval remains negative across most domains, trails by the widest margin on prices and inflation, and that's going to get worse. Only 31% approve at the moment. That's going to get worse.
That
Trump
allows you to
fares
talk
only
tariffs.
slightly better on jobs and the economy. Trump is underwater on foreign policy, healthcare, and education. And so immigration's the only thing that he's decent on because he's only underwater by 2 points.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
He has a large lead on border security, 10-point lead, which is not really that large. You expect Republicans to win by 30 points on crime.
They
Right.
like to think that they can do
10
that at
points
any
is not a
time.
big deal. Border security is the only domain where Trump has a positive rating on anything.
And that's, as you pointed out, well worth repeating, distinct in a lot of respondents' minds from immigration as a policy. Do I want it to be orderly at the border so that you have to show paperwork and come in a certain fashion?
Yes, everybody does.
Do I not want anybody to be able to come in? That's a no. I actually feel like this is a nice country, and people who want to come here and improve their lives are worth having.
Especially if they want to work and pay taxes. But
Yeah.
if you come here with your family and you want asylum, is it okay to snatch you and the Americans standing next to you and send them to El Salvador prisons? No.
All right. Good. A
Well,
good
what
answer.
if we told you we also need 30 gazillion more dollars to be able to do this the way we want? Do you like that idea? No. The other thing that's interesting, Adrian Carrasquillo, who covers immigration for The Bulwark, has a really interesting article about KILMAR becoming a symbol of everything that the Trump administration is doing wrong with immigration, which is highlighted by that G. Elliott Morris poll that says that if you actually tell people and explain the case there, Trump's ratings go down. So you may recall the very famous Shepherd Ferry, was it? The Hope picture of Obama.
I do. Yes, I
so
used it for the Pope.
White House itself did a similar style picture of KILMAR, and then they wrote MS-13 at the bottom. And for some reason, they thought that was clever, but all they did was spark a whole artist revolt about that.
Yeah.
And within the art world, there's all sorts of memes about KILMAR, which are breaking through. Free KILMAR, bring KILMAR home. He's on signs. He's on posters. It backfired big time.
Yeah. They're still embroiled in this, and Trump's still insisting that, his knuckles, that really did say M and S and 1 and 3, and it did not, and yesterday they couldn't get Kristi Noem to admit, hey, that's not what's on his knuckles. Here's the picture, right? You'll admit that this is not an M, right?
No, I didn't see the picture.
She wouldn't do it. Yeah,
so
and they
Eric
took
Swalwell
it out.
said, well, walk
Here
the
it
picture
is.
over to her and put it right under her nose.
Show me the M. No. And so she just sat there and said, President Trump is very strong. President Trump is very strong.
We're following policy on this. That was all right. We're following policy on
You're
this.
not. And this also doesn't say M. So I want you to be taken seriously. He said, I am. I'm taken seriously.
This is a fake picture, and you are falling for it.
Yeah. Well, she's not even. Everybody can see that she's just knows that she'll be in trouble and lose the job that she's enjoying because it comes with a makeup artist. If she says, yeah, I know that's not an M. That's not an M. It's a marijuana leaf. Starts with M. That's all I got. But I can't say that or he won't let me fly around and
But I want a new plane. You have a new plane. I want a new plane. Get me a new plane.
Right. How come I didn't get one? Well, maybe she'll be mad.
She wants a new plane.
Oh, I did not know that. What's wrong with the one she doesn't have?
Not expensive enough
to use. Oh, that must be it. Yeah, I mean that's the reason he wants this one from Qatar is it's not the current Air Force One is not luxuriously appointed in this fashion. That seems to be the new conclusion everyone is reaching. What can you do? She like all the rest of them is horrific. And watching her squirm is fun.
From the Washington Post.
Yes.
Trump wants a new plane. So does Homeland Security Secretary Noem.
All right, show that to me.
The
Send
DHS
it my way.
plane could cost up to $50 million from the U.S. Coast Guard's budget.
Oh. It has to come out of their budget. Well, they don't have to guard anything but the coast, and we don't like that. Let it come out of the budget they use to patrol Mar-a-Lago. from the sea?
I don't know. Why doesn't it come out of Trump's makeup budget?
Oh, well, yeah. That's probably got enough money to cover it. All right, she needs a new plane for no reason whatsoever. I guess she's been flying around so much that she realizes this is not very luxurious.
Yeah, Lauren Underwood wrote, she already has a Gulfstream 5, by the way, but she wants a new one paid with your taxpayer dollars.
Sure. They just can't get enough. They think that these government jobs are about officialdom and trappings and red carpets and such, and I guess hair extensions, as it turns out. But not the case. Hey, before we go, since it's Thursday and you don't get a chance to go back, I wanted to point out something we did during the first break. One of the few actual diplomatic things going on in the Middle East trip is the pressure from the Middle East, from the Arabian states, to drop sanctions against the new government of Syria. And
which, in my view, is not a bad thing, because the guy
this is what I want you to tell us.
He's a reformer, and it's only going to help Syria.
It's been very interesting because, he does have that. He has a background. And if this were a Democratic president doing it, the Republicans would be screaming about the background. And that is to say that but this is the very person that you were telling us about weeks ago, saying, see, the thing about him is he has this background with an Al-Qaeda affiliated terrorist organization. Yes. But all I remember is you telling us
he got rid of them.
He's less
working with all the different groups. He's much better than Assad ever was. It's a good
that's
idea.
Easy to be.
If you don't want Syria to fail and get Assad back,
yes.
Then,
I don't
want to support him.
This is the danger of Middle Eastern politics anywhere. Sometimes
Security
the
politics
people
doesn't work.
Yeah, right. Yes, that's basically it. That's what real politique is about. But it is uncomfortable, I'm sure, for Trump supporters who are attuned to pointing at people from the Middle East, yelling the word terrorist, and having it even once have been right. And I understand he's still on the list of sanctioned terrorists himself.
Well, he's being taken off.
But the country's being taken off. I guess he'll be taken off shortly, too. All right after Trump gets out of the mobile McDonald's, which I haven't seen him visit yet. All right, Greg, I know, shortened week for us, but I appreciate your fitting so much in. We'll see you on Monday.
See you Monday.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Late update, Darwin Darko says, hey, Darwin, I, for one, enjoyed the S&P joke. And it took a while. It occurred to me very quickly, and then I was like, the moment has passed here. And do I insert this joke later on? Right. All right. Well, that's the way. I'm sure that's the way that Donald Trump hears those things. All right. So many things we could follow up with, and what can I tell you? We're not going to get to all of it. Let me see what's in pocket. Okay. So today, Thursday, May 15th, I guess, is the day this issue comes to a head. The Supreme Court has some work ahead of it, which the New York Times has taken upon itself to describe, and in, I guess, what has now become typical New York Times fashion, done unwarranted favors for the wrong side, the bad guys in the upcoming arguments. What's happening here? Here's the New York Times piece. So I warn you ahead of time, the New York Times, headline-wise at least, and in its choices in terms of who to interview to get insight into the issue, have done you wrong in all of this. What's happening? Here's the headline. At Supreme Court, a once fringe birthright citizenship theory, that's the issue for today, takes the spotlight. And as listeners, to the show, this one, very well. All right, birthright citizenship ideas in the Trump administration. I know what that's about. They want to revoke the idea of birthright citizenship. Bad idea, generally, and unconstitutional in particular. So what's happening here? A once fringe birthright citizenship theory, that is the one that Trump's adopted, that you don't become a citizen of this country if you're born here. That's the fringe theory. now takes the spotlight. They've made it to the Supreme Court to say, isn't it possible that everyone throughout American history has been wrong about this and I have been right? Is that possible? It's always possible, I guess. But remember, all right, long story short here, what you're talking about is the theory advanced by, among others, but chiefly by John Eastman, the discredited lawyer and legal scholar, I guess, that was behind so many of the discredited fringe theories, like the one that says if you lose the presidential election, you can write your own electoral votes and try to beat up the cops so that you can get into the Congress and then hand over your fake electoral college votes and force everybody to read those instead and make you the president. And that is kind of a fringy theory, don't you think? And yet there he is, and others pointing out that, well, one, now he's come up with this theory about birthright citizenship and is there to argue it, and it's as fringe as the theory that if you lose the presidential election, you can write fake papers and beat people up and become the president. That also very fringe. And it's worth pointing out, he's been or is in the process of being disbarred for these stupid fringe theories. He's not a good expert to ask questions about, although he is the world's foremost expert in the crackpot theory that is today in front of the Supreme Court, which is egregious all by itself. How did this make it to the Supreme Court? That's the real problem. So I suppose, they're probably thinking, well, he's one of the parties to this, or he's one of the people who formulated this theory that is featured in the case, so we ought to be asking him. This is one of the brainchild, but it's not a brainchild. It's just I guess you could call it a brain fart, but this is all it is. Like, I don't want these people to be American citizens, and on its face, the Constitution says they are. But just like my theory of the presidential election, that maybe if you beat people up and slip them a note that says, by the way, actually, instead of 250 years of interpretation of this part of the Constitution as meaning that they do get citizenship, it actually means they don't. And if you don't like it, we'll beat you up, and who knows who will arrest or throw in prison for getting in our way. That's still a fringy theory, and you should not feel any more comfortable about interviewing him for insight into it than you should any raving lunatic you might find, I don't know, say wandering the streets and screaming that the end is near. However, I guess if one of those guys, I suppose if you're writing about whether or not the end is near, you could convince yourself, well, this is one of the foremost experts in whether the end is near or not. No, even then, you'd probably recognize it's just, I don't know, the suit, I guess, fools people. All right, well, here's the rest of it, I guess. I don't know whether we'll read through the whole damn thing, but you can guess what they wrote up. The subheader of this piece, before the Trump presidency, there was broad consensus, you could say, that the 14th Amendment established birthright citizenship for children born in the United States. And this is really ultimately the ultimate expression of pre-wrongism, I guess, the way I refer to those things on the show and online elsewhere. Just the idea that maybe everything that everybody agreed they understood as a bedrock interpretation, the unchanging and the unchallenged interpretation of the Constitution for 200 plus years is wrong and has been wrong the whole time. And all it takes to convince you that you were wrong is, I don't know, me saying it. And then a couple of, can I work over a few Supreme Court justices such that they come around to the opposite conclusion? I don't think they're going to get there 5 that they want with this. But in the meantime, seeing it treated as a serious theory is quite upsetting. And of course, seeing it treated as a serious theory by a guy who's made so many mistakes of this type that they're disbarring him feels like, when do you stop giving this guy credibility? The whole piece is illustrated with a photo of John Eastman, a California law professor. That's how they tell, an insurrectionist, a guy who's been disbarred, a guy who very nearly faced criminal charges. His theories were so outrageous they almost charged him criminally. He's just a California law professor, and he's got an unorthodox theory. According to Abby Van Sickle, reporting this for the New York Times, shortly after the Supreme Court announced in April that it would consider a nationwide freeze on President Trump's executive order ending birthright citizenship, he gleefully spoke to reporters in the Oval Office. It was the street level, street corner lunatic got a street corner lunatic president to say, "This is actually my theory." Mr. Trump said he was, quote, "so happy the justices would take up the citizenship issue because it has been so misunderstood. The 14th Amendment," he said, "long held to grant citizenship to anyone born in the United States, is actually, quote, about slavery." In a way, yes, true. But, okay, that's not about tourists coming in and touching a piece of sand and then all of a sudden there's citizenship, Mr. Trump said. This is all about slavery. So I suppose if you take those tourists and enslave them, then their children could have citizenship, I suppose. Maybe he's interested in doing it that way, unless they're Russian and have bought a condo in one of his buildings in Florida, in which case it's fine. For more than a century, most scholars and courts have agreed that through the 14th Amendment, although the 14th Amendment was added to the Constitution after the Civil War, it was not, in fact, all about slavery. Instead, courts have held that the amendment extended citizenship not just to the children of former slaves, but also to babies born within the borders of the United States. I suppose it's possible that the original motivation may, in fact, have been, by the way, I guess, about legalizing as citizens the children of slaves or slaves, everybody being held in slavery at the time. That's true, but one of the things about the rule of law and the fact that even then, even after the Civil War, they wouldn't simply write, "Hey, the slaves are now citizens." They couldn't bring themselves to talk about slavery even right after the Civil War. Well, if you're going to put things in broad and generalized terms and you don't want to simply make it about one particular thing, slavery, and admit it, then yeah, you're going to end up with generalized applicability. That's sort of the way the law is. How can you make it work for slaves, but not anybody else, if you won't write "this is about slaves" into it? And if you can write "this is about slaves," but choose not to, and that's the way the judges often work. Well, they knew how to write something that limited it only to slaves, and they chose not to do that. You could certainly argue that they were uncomfortable talking about slavery, but they did just have a whole war about slavery. And, of course, slavery and involuntary servitude, as they put it, is in fact mentioned in the other Civil War amendments. So again, the mechanism was available to them and they chose not to limit it in that way. And that's a legitimate way of landing on, birthright citizenship is kind of applicable to everyone. All right, let's see. There's a bit more to take a look at here inside this piece, but really it's the critique of the piece that I'm interested in. But it goes on to say, the notion that the amendment might not do so, that is to say, extend birthright citizenship to everyone, was once considered an unorthodox theory promoted by an obscure California law professor named John Eastman and his colleagues at the Claremont Institute, a conservative think tank. The same professor who would later provide Mr. Trump with legal arguments he used to try to overturn the election results in 2020. So, he's a bit of a crackpot with a track record of manipulating himself, perhaps, into believing that there are strong legal theories to be discovered that actually upset and overturn 200 years of the way we've been thinking about, ourselves and our governing document. They have been pushing it for decades, said John Yoo, who himself has been involved in this same exercise in the past, this time on behalf of torture. Most people sort of believe, well, the United States has its constitutional prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment, so torture is really not among the things in the toolkit of the presidency or the federal government in general. And John Yoo said, maybe that's actually wrong. Maybe we've had that upside down and backwards the whole time, and really the Constitution has been a very pro-torture document, and couldn't we think of it that way? And he made his bones thinking like that, and even he thinks that Eastman is a nut bar. They've been pushing it for decades. It was thought to be a wacky idea that only political philosophers would buy. I guess here they mean Curtis Yarvin. They finally got a president who agrees, except the president has no idea what he's agreeing to. I win in this? Okay, then I like that theory. The White House did not respond to a request for comment. President Trump promoted the theory during his first campaign, but didn't act on it until his second term. He signed an executive order. That was the action. On his first day to end birthright citizenship, he thought, for the children of undocumented immigrants and some temporary foreign residents. Legal challenges were swift and emphatic because everybody knows that's not how it works. Challengers, oh yeah, right, we have sound effects for that. I think here we're interviewing one of the other experts on this topic. Can you eliminate birthright citizenship with an executive order, even though it seems to be enshrined in the Constitution? You would think that might require, at the minimum, statutory action, that is, by both houses of Congress and then presumably signed by the president. Or constitutional amendment might be necessary. Can you simply sign a piece of paper that says, I don't like it, so I want it gone?
That is not how this works!
All right. Well, case closed. I don't think we even need to have these Supreme Court arguments at this point. Legal challenges, swift and emphatic, just as we said.
That is not how this works!
It's very emphatic. Challengers pointed to the text of the 14th Amendment, which states, and see how you feel about this, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. So, naturalized, sure, you understand that. Born, well, everyone understands that, right? All persons born, or, not and, but or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Boom, it's over. Proponents of the policy have pointed to birthright citizenship as a cornerstone of what it means to be an American. So not very important, right? Part of the national ethos of the country as a place that is open to everyone, regardless of faith, color, or creed. One of the world's 20 most developed, of the world's 20 most developed countries, only Canada and the United States grant automatic citizenship to children born within its borders. You might even say it was part of Americans' exceptionalism, in fact. In a brief to the Supreme Court, an immigrant advocacy group argued that birthright citizenship is at the core of our nation's foundational precept that all people born on our soil are created equal, regardless of their parentage. State attorneys general who are challenging the policy weighed in with a brief that argued that the Supreme Court had already settled the question in the landmark 1898 case of United States versus Wong Kim Ark, when the court found that a man born in San Francisco to Chinese parents was a citizenship. So far, since 1898, courts have agreed. Judges in Washington State, Massachusetts, and Maryland, because they are all members of the United States of America, and the United States Supreme Court said this was the reality. All of these other judges have suddenly, quickly instituted nationwide pauses on Mr. Trump's policy. Well, 1898, that's pretty good, right? In oral arguments this week, the justices will primarily consider whether federal judges have the power to order these temporary pauses, known as nationwide injunctions, but the question of birthright citizenship will form the backdrop. So, it is in fact the case about, well, can we really have these nationwide injunctions from judges all over the country, just in these little backwaters, like, I don't know, the Northern District of Texas, say, for something like that. In an interview, Mr. Eastman said he developed his views on birthright citizenship after the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001. Back then, Mr. Eastman, who had clerked for Justice Clarence Thomas, was a law professor at Chapman University in Orange County, California, and director of the Center for Constitutional Jurisprudence at the Claremont Institute. In late November 2001, a man named Yasser Essam Hamdi, you might remember, was taken into U.S. custody by U.S. forces in Afghanistan and transferred to the U.S. military base/prison at Guantanamo Bay. Officials learned Mr. Hamdi was an American citizen. His mother, a Saudi-ish national, had given birth to him while the family was living in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where Mr. Hamdi's father was working as a chemical engineer. Because Mr. Hamdi was a U.S. citizen, the authorities believed they could no longer hold him as an enemy combatant in Guantanamo Bay, where he was considered beyond the reach of the full legal protections of federal courts, so they transferred him to a naval brig in Norfolk, Virginia. In 2004, in a friend of the court brief in the case, Mr. Eastman argued that the idea that citizenship was automatically conferred on all children born on American soil was a generally accepted, though erroneous, interpretation of the 14th Amendment that was incorrect as a matter of text, historical practice, and political theory, except that in 1998 they said, no, that's the one we're accepting, and since then it has been accepted, so it is not a mistake in terms of historical practice and political theory at all. You may have thought they reached the wrong conclusion in 1898, but in this country, you reach a conclusion, you stick with it until and unless you can prove that we're much better off the other way, and there's a good logical reason to believe that it was a mistake, not just a policy preference. Mr. Eastman drew on the work of a California State University San Bernardino political science professor affiliated with the Claremont Institute, Edward J. Erler, who everyone has heard of, who offered the same theory in books published in 1997 and 2003. Another guy said this once. Mr. Erler, who did not respond to a request for comment for some reason, argued that the children of people in the country illegally or temporarily are not automatically citizens, although the idea that children born in the United States automatically become citizens has deep roots in common law. It was not adopted in the text of the Constitution until 1868 as part of the 14th Amendment. So what? It's there now. It came in a sentence that overturned Dred Scott, the 1857 Supreme Court decision that affirmed slavery and helped prompt the Civil War. Eastman claimed that nowhere during the debate over the 14th Amendment had lawmakers agreed to include temporary visitors. The justices rejected this view, finding the Constitution's due process protections applied to Mr. Hamdi, and probably also at some point said, well, again, they had every available opportunity to say this is about slaves and slaves only, and they didn't do it. Still, for years afterward, Mr. Eastman and Mr. Yu publicly debated this issue, with Eastman arguing his theory that birthright citizenship was not in the Constitution, and Mr. Yu arguing it was. For much of that time, the debate felt abstract, Yu said, mostly of interest to legal scholars. Never has an abstract idea had such an enormous policy effect. It's like it almost jumped from law review articles to the White House, which is exactly what it did. This is really the legal theory equivalent of stovepiping of unvetted intelligence that we heard about. Remember when Dick Cheney was on the I don't know, he's not on the outs, so is he on the ins? Was that what you call it? When he was central to Republican theory making way back when, and he decided that that's the way the intelligence service ought to work. Now this is the way the legal profession ought to work. If you have a crackpot theory that no one believes in but would be advantageous to Donald Trump, you should serve it up directly to the president, and the president should proclaim that to be policy from here on in, and that'll get it to the Supreme Court. And that will mean that your fringe theory will have, quote unquote, its day in court. Well, now we have to cross our fingers that there aren't 5 justices who are willing to go along with this. Well, that leap did happen when Trump ran for president in 2015. And in an interview with Fox News personality Bill O'Reilly in August of 2015, Trump outlined his plans to overhaul the immigration system. O'Reilly seemed skeptical at first because he had read the Constitution and how it had been interpreted for 100 years, and then became increasingly frustrated. O'Reilly pointed to the 14th Amendment as an impediment to Trump's plan, but Trump responded, "I think you're wrong about the 14th Amendment." "I can quote it. You want me to quote you the amendment?" Riley said, nearly shouting. "If you're born here, you're an American, period, period." But there are many lawyers saying that that's not the way it is, Trump responded. He'd heard from one, so he figured there were many. Eastman said Trump was likely referring to him, but also to other academics who had published on the issue. I guess there are more than one. He said he was not sure how his views had reached the presidential candidate, and it's not entirely clear that they had, by the way. Donald Trump is fully capable of going on national television saying many lawyers say that that's wrong, and not knowing whether or not any lawyers do say it's wrong. And it's a lot easier to believe than the idea of him like doing any research on it, or even reading things that people handed him like, there is a lawyer somewhere who says this. Really? Give me a report on it so I'll read it. That's not happening. Trump did not pursue a plan to end birthright citizenship in his first term. Eastman said that in 2019 he met with Attorney General Bill Barr at Barr's invitation to discuss a possible executive order on birthright citizenship, but nothing came of it because he knew he couldn't do it. Barr didn't respond to any requests for comment here. Eastman said he was very happy when Trump announced he would end birthright citizenship on his first day back in office. For a guy who's about to be disbarred for his crackpot theories, I guess he probably thought this will redeem me. Maybe they won't disbar me if one of my crackpot theories breaks through with a crackpot president. By then, Eastman and Trump had a close association. Eastman was one of the architects of the plan to create fake slates of pro-Trump electors in states that Joe Biden had won, and to urge Vice President Pence, to accept those slates while presiding over the certification of the 2020 election. And actually, that's as crackpot as it could possibly get. And if both of those things are falling out of this brain, don't listen to the other one. It's possible sometimes, like you can have 2 theories in your head and one's crazy and one's not. That is possible, just not for that guy. And the fake electors thing is just such a taint, quite honestly. There's nothing you can take seriously from this guy, up to and including, "What time is it, John?" Don't listen to his answer. It's the AI chatbot of legal theory. A California judge recommended that Mr. Eastman be disbarred over that episode. He's appealing, though his California law license is currently inactive as a result. He's also fighting criminal charges that are slowly making their way through state court in Arizona. A case against him and other defendants in Georgia appears unlikely to go forward. Eastman said that the president did not directly consult him about birthright citizenship, the order, but that several of his friends, whom he declined to name — I have lots of friends, you wouldn't know them, they're Canadian — were involved. They knew that my scholarship was kind of at the forefront of this. Trump's order fueled new interest in examining the underpinnings of birthright citizenship, said Elon Musk, law professor at the University of Minnesota and author of a book on the 14th Amendment. President Trump has a rather uncanny ability to move Overton windows. That's probably true. Issues that people thought were off the table are on the table now. I added the word now here, Werman said. Werman argues that a close read of the 1898 case and the historical record reveals that the Supreme Court has never firmly held that children born to those illegally present are citizens. A flurry of friend of the court briefs have brought some of these ideas to the justices, including one from Mr. Eastman. In a brief to the justices in late April, he argued that although the justices had agreed to hear arguments only about the nationwide pause in the president's policy, they should also decide the merits and end birthright citizenship. By the way, they can do that. Almost universally, the choice by Supreme Court justices is decide only what is absolutely necessary to finish and dispense of this case. If you can simply say, we think nationwide injunctions are okay, they're going to leave it at that. If we think they're not okay, they may leave it at that. But he's saying you should also decide the other side issue, essentially, of whether or not birthright citizenship is really a thing. There are a lot of people in the country waiting for a resolution of this issue. He said, is the executive order valid or not? And the longer we wait, the more consternation it's caused. All possibly true, but it would be very, very, very out of keeping for the Supreme Court to decide that this is the place where they'll decide on birthright citizenship, especially in a pleading from somebody who's been disbarred. And it's really rather remarkable that they would even accept an amicus brief from somebody who isn't even a member of the bar, but they do that from time to time. Usually, I don't know. Maybe they should require that you get some co-counsel on something like that. Anyway, we'll be right back with more. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We continue in our consideration, just briefly, our consideration of today's Supreme Court arguments. Jamel Bowie chiming in sharing the New York Times' article here. I am fascinated by the editorial choice to give the last word, and I'll add a little bit here, last word on this important constitutional issue, right? To give the last word to a disbarred charlatan pushing a discredited constitutional theory. And I mean, they don't even really have to. He submitted an amicus brief. But again, it's probably worth pointing out that this is actually a case questioning, I guess, the ability of judges in federal district court to impose nationwide injunctions, which, is not really even a super difficult question. Like, yeah, they can do that. I mean, it's reviewable. So what's the problem? Essentially, is I think how the court would come to view it. And if you bring a federal judge a question of nationwide policy, like, I don't understand, as onerous and weird as it is to have Matthew Kaczmarek imposing nationwide injunctions on policy from his small corner of Amarillo, Texas. If you're asking a question about, whether people whose children are born on United States soil but not Amarillo, I mean, can it really be the case that, well, if you're born in Amarillo, you're not a citizen, but if you're born just over the border of the federal district court's jurisdiction in the southern district of Texas or something, then you are a citizen? Is that really a coherent way of dealing with policy? No, so I guess you're kind of stuck with it. And it's not even especially troublesome, given that if somebody imposes a nationwide injunction, first of all, very often they say, and I'm staying the effectiveness of my injunction pending appeal. And even if they don't, you go and you appeal it. And if you can make it all, and it's troublesome that it's stacked up this way, and that an extremely conservative Supreme Court is all that stands between you and the ability of a local lunatic like Kaczmarek to impose real policy conclusions. Because, yeah, it's reviewable, but it'll be reviewable by the Fifth Circuit, and the Fifth Circuit's kind of crazy, and you'll end up drawing a panel of, two idiots and somebody else, maybe three idiots, and they're just willing to say, yeah, we like the political outcome of this, kick it up to the Supreme Court by sustaining Kaczmarek. And then you got to depend on, all right, are there 5 robes available to uphold this stupid idea or not? And will they do this and cause chaos? And that's never a really great bet. But even here, all right, well, you're probably going to say, well, it's up the court's prerogative to impose injunctions. This is a check on the power of the presidency, or for that matter, I guess, on Congress if they were to pass an unconstitutional statute. That's always been the role we've assigned ourselves. And after all, we're being asked, do we like the role we've assigned ourselves? If you don't, that's one thing. But if you do, you're probably likely to sustain it. Now, the fact that the question at issue in the executive order was about birthright citizenship, they don't have to settle that in order to settle the nature of this suit. So they probably just won't. So they probably don't really need to spend a whole article talking about that issue. And they certainly don't need to spend the whole article talking about that issue with a crackpot who thinks that if I write down actually the Electoral College voted for somebody else and hand that to the vice president, that makes somebody legitimately president of the United States. That's not a guy you want to talk to about that issue or any other issue. That's one of the things. Now, I guess the arguments are underway. And I happened to see during the break I'll have to put this in pocket so I can share with you. Adam Serwer writing on Blue Sky, commenting on Audrey Laud Mercy. Okay. But better known, I guess, by the screen identifier of Bard, as in on the a member of the Bar Association, Bard and Bougie. Hi, but making very. So is there? Can I look at the? Am I gonna get like? Yeah, here we go. Now I guess I am looking at the actual name here, so I can stop trying to pronounce It's very difficult when the screen name is all mashed in to one word, but I guess we're looking at the account of Madiba Denny, who I've seen all over the place, and I recognize the screen name and the avatar photo and everything. Author of The Originalism Trap and writer at ballsandstrikes.org, among other places, and clearly I think we all recognize her. If you saw the picture and you saw the account, you'd know we're talking about Bard and Bougie and Newlywed, a.k.a. Madiba Denny, a legal scholar following, among other things, this case, no doubt, and making a great observation, as really good legal scholars do. Apparently, the DOJ in court arguing that the 14th Amendment applied only, how this argument goes, only to children of former slaves, and I guess the slaves themselves having been born there, not to illegal immigrants. Why do they think it doesn't apply to illegal immigrants? The language doesn't have any limiting clauses attached to it, but what they're saying is, well, at the time the 14th Amendment was written, there was no such thing as an illegal immigrant. Because at the time, if you arrived here in the United States through whatever means and said you wanted to stay here, that was it. You are now an immigrant to the United States. There wasn't any way to be an illegal immigrant to the United States, which is actually very interesting as a concept and probably worth pointing out to people. Yeah, historical practice here in the United States was if you got here, that's all there is. You are an immigrant. This idea that there was a process you were supposed to go through is a latter-day invention. But that they're not interested in. What they're interested in saying is, well, they didn't limit the language to slaves only because everybody knew that that was all they could be talking about because there was no such thing as an illegal immigrant. But that backfires as an argument for a number of reasons. And the way that she suggests is, for instance, if they left it out of the language of the amendment because there was no such thing as an illegal immigrant at the time, so they couldn't even imagine it, and so therefore it must not be included, can be extended in several exciting ways. For instance, as she writes, thrilled to learn from DOJ's argument that the 14th Amendment applied to the children of former slaves, not illegal immigrants, who didn't exist as a class yet, that modern firearms must then, therefore, she would say, not be protected by the Second Amendment. They didn't exist as a class. Does the Second Amendment protect the right to bear weapons of war, modern machine guns, essentially, or things that can be fired as machine guns? And they say yes, because the language is unequivocal, the right to bear. What part of shall not be infringed do you not understand? Well, what part of didn't exist as a class at the time do you not understand? You just, you've made an argument that was convenient to you now in terms of immigration. But, if you actually extend that as a concept, that anything that wasn't known to exist at the time can't possibly be the subject of or now be subject to the Constitution, well, that rules out an awful lot of firearms. But suddenly that will no longer be an interesting concept to you. But also, Adam Serwer arguing, I don't see why this argument works for them, since it means the amendment couldn't have been intended to exclude undocumented. That's the other conclusion that you can reach here. If you didn't know it existed at the time, then it couldn't possibly have been your intention to prevent it from existing at the time either. You had no idea that it ever could exist, so you clearly didn't write it out of the Constitution. And I would also say the other thing to present there is, look, they had the language available to them to say this applies only to slaves. The end. And if they don't like using the word slaves, they could say those held in involuntary servitude. They could have said that. It was a major topic of discussion at the time of the writing of the amendment, and they chose not to do it and said they had all persons. Why would it say something like all persons? Had somebody brought up, well, really, all persons, do you really mean that if you just cross the border? Because they, I'm sure by that time they were starting to think about, well, maybe we should have some kind of immigration process so that it's simply not just if you walk across the border or you land on a ship or you jump off of a ship, swim to shore, you're here and your children are citizens. Like, I'm sure they contemplated that. And still they said, nah, that's the way we're going to leave it. If that was happening, they could have limited it. The language for that was available to them. They rejected both ideas. So, I don't know. My guess is that the justices will see it that way too, with the exception of Clarence Thomas, for whom I guess Eastman clerked and he wants to bring this stuff in, and Alito because he loves trolling people. But there's probably not a lot of interest in deciding something that doesn't have to be decided in order to finish with this case. That's going to bother the rest of the conservatives, generally speaking. All right. So I found that rather interesting, to say the least. That was a good way of putting it. All involved. Jamel, excellent observation. Adam, excellent observation. And, of course, let me go back and make sure I can get the first name correct. Again, Madiba, excellent observation. All around, so many other things to do and so little time to do it. Let's see. I had mentioned, but I don't have access to, so I can't really share the Business Insider piece itself with problematic framing in the headline, and you'll spot it right away. Don Jr. is the new Hunter Biden. Okay. What we mean is the new person about whom America should be talking if they are in fact worried about the son of a president cashing in on or trading on dad's name. Except, one, Hunter Biden was on a completely different scale, and two, wasn't necessarily always simply trying to trade on dad's name in the same way. That's certainly true. But yeah, I think to make the comparison between the quality and quantity here is a bad idea generally, but it gets the concept across. If you were or claimed to have been concerned about Hunter Biden's activities, then unless you're just a huge hypocrite, you almost positively would ordinarily, logically be expected to be concerned about Don Jr.'s activities, but the fact that you're not should reveal you as a relatively unserious person and should either mean both go to jail or stop talking about Hunter Biden because he didn't do anything wrong. And certainly not in comparison to Don Jr., who's just taking gigantic chunks of cash and pocketing them. And in fact, I guess I can read some of it to you too, because it's from Business Insider, and for whatever reason, that pops through on Pocket. The word is here, although if I try to open the original, I want to at least give credit to the writer of this piece, but as I recall, their firewall is just so fast to pop up that I can't even do it. Bethany McLean. Okay, got it. All I really have to do is create an account to keep reading, but for some reason that took me 5 reloads to do. Anyway, last November, only 6 days after his father was elected president, Donald Trump Jr. made a career move that on the surface, at least, seemed a bit odd. He became a partner in a small investment startup called 1789 Capital. I am curious about why they choose 1789 and whether that has anything to do with the year or is it the address from which they were working. I'm not sure. 1789. I don't know. For people who don't really care very much about the Constitution, I don't know why they would land on that. Based in Palm Beach, Florida, by the way, 2 miles from Mar-a-Lago, because he hates commuting, I guess. At that point, 1789 was a microscopic player in the world of venture capital. So you would have thought that much bigger dollars were available to him elsewhere. But I guess Don Jr. had the vision to see that with limitless corruption and the opportunity to have yourself pardoned if you're ever called to account for your corruption, you might want to take the deal not of a partnership in a larger firm that's worth many, many millions or billions of dollars more, but which you only get a small share in, versus getting in on the ground floor of your own personally owned criminal enterprise. 1789 was a microscopic player. Why join it? It had raised less than $200 million, hadn't made many investments beyond leading a group that put $15 million into Tucker Carlson's new media company. Its goal, according to its founders, is to create a, quote, parallel economy, investing in anti-woke businesses that align with MAGA values. That might be why it was initially attractive to him ideologically. Grandiose, certainly, in its plans for a company that had $200 million to its name and had its biggest investment was $15 million in Tucker Carlson's new media company because he just got fired from his old one. Thinking I'll create a parallel economy seems, like I said, maybe like a delusion of grandeur. But ever since Trump joined 1789, its portfolio has begun to blossom. Despite its tiny size, the firm has been granted shares, for some strange reason, in several coveted offerings, including Elon Musk's SpaceX. How did that happen? The shares, which are widely viewed as an almost certain home run, are essentially an insider deal. To participate in the offering, you typically have to receive an invitation from someone already in the club. In addition, 1789 has invested in Musk's artificial intelligence company, XAI, as well as a handful of startups that have received or are vying for contracts from the Defense Department. Not at all under the control of his dad, right? Almost overnight, a VC firm involving the president's son has become a significant beneficiary of the federal bureaucracy, long derided by President Trump as the swamp. There is nothing wrong with an investment company making bets based on its connections. That's an integral part of the VC game. And there's no evidence that, I'm not even sure that's true, but there's no evidence that any of 1789's deals break laws prohibiting favoritism to individual contractors yet. But given their potential for creating a conflict of interest, the firm's investments have alarmed Washington insiders familiar with the process. What's more, the Trump administration's lack of transparency, particularly around moves being made by Musk and DOGE, makes it impossible to tell if the president's family is improperly making money by funneling government business to the companies it invests in. And that, of course, is the idea. All right. And there's a lot to it, including details on just how much money he might actually be making from this thing. But, I wanted to at least plant that in your ear and let you know that it's happening. I don't know whether I can justify spending the rest of the show reading that when there's so many other things happening. And golly, there are a lot. How about if I throw in this piece here? ProPublica, likewise, with a very long piece that I can't read all of, that has another angle, I guess, on this play, right? Elon Musk mentioned in the previous article. What's Elon up to now that has the attention of ProPublica? The Trump administration leaned on African countries, right? By the way, they're now doing that, not leaning on, but begging and pleading of Arabian countries to do deals with Musk, and in particular, Starlink for those purposes. Well, it's not just happening with fabulously wealthy countries owned by single oligarchs or single monarchs, but they're even squeezing poorer countries. They are, after all, countries, and therefore in control of rather sizable budgets. The Trump administration leaned on African countries. The goal, get business for Elon Musk. Joshua Kaplan, Brett Murphy, Justin Elliott, and Alex Majerski have teamed up to put this piece together, just published today. And we can give you the reporting highlights to keep things short and sweet. Maximum pressure is the first one. The State Department of the United States of America conducted a months-long campaign to push a small African country, Gambia in this case, to help Musk's satellite internet company, records and interviews show. Point 2 here, ram this through. Working closely with executives at Starlink, the U.S. government has made a global push to help expand Musk's business empire in the developing world. And point 3, crony capitalism. Diplomats said the events that they held all over the place were an alarming departure from standard practice, both because the tactics used and the person who benefit most from them. Very unusual. Let me give you the opening scenario here from the first couple paragraphs. In early February, Sharon Cromer, U.S. ambassador to Gambia, went to visit one of the country's cabinet ministers at his agency's headquarters above a partially abandoned strip mall off a dirt road, if you want to know about how fabulously wealthy this country is. It had been 2 weeks since President Donald Trump took office, and Cromer had pressing business to discuss. She needed the minister to fall in line to help Elon Musk. Weird. Starlink, Musk's satellite internet company, had spent months trying to secure regulatory approval to sell internet access in the impoverished West African country. As head of Gambia's communications ministry, Lamine Jabi oversees the government's review of Starlink's license application. Jabi had been slow to sign off, and the company had grown impatient. And now the top U.S. government official in Gambia was in Jabi's office to intervene. Musk's Department of Government Efficiency loomed over this conversation. The administration had already begun freezing foreign aid projects, and early in the meeting, Cromer, a Biden appointee, said something that rattled Gambian officials in the room. She listed the ways that the U.S. was supporting the country, according to two people present and contemporaneous notes, noting that key initiatives like the one that funds a $25 million project to improve the electrical system were currently under review. Guess who was reviewing them? Jabi's top deputy, Hassan Jallo, told ProPublica he saw Cromer's message as a veiled threat. If Starlink doesn't get its license, the U.S. could cut off the desperately needed funds. The implication was that they were connected, Jallo said. In recent months, senior State Department officials in both Washington and Gambia have coordinated with Starlink executives to coax, lobby, and browbeat at least 7 Gambian government ministers to help Musk. Records and interviews show one of those cabinet officials told ProPublica his government is under maximum pressure to yield. In mid-March, Cromer escalated the campaign by writing to Gambia's president with an, quote, important request. That day, a contentious D.C. meeting between Musk employees and Jabi had ended in an impasse. She urged the president to circumvent Jabi and facilitate the necessary approvals for Starlink to commence operations. According to a copy of the letter obtained by ProPublica, Jabi told confidants that he felt the ambassador was trying to get him fired. The saga in Gambia is the starkest known example of the Trump administration wielding the U.S. government's foreign policy apparatus to advance the business interests of Musk, a top Trump advisor, arguably president, and the world's richest man, who obviously needs lots of help, right? Since Trump's inauguration, the State Department has intervened on behalf of Starlink in Gambia and at least 4 other developing nations. Previously unreported records and interviews now show. The Trump administration, as they gutted foreign aid, U.S. diplomats have pressured governments to fast-track licenses for Starlink and arranged conversations between company employees and foreign leaders. In cables, U.S. officials have said that for their foreign counterparts, helping Starlink is a chance to prove their commitment to good relations with the U.S. That is outrageously corrupt, as you must immediately be able to see. But just wanted to put that out there so that you know it's happening. I'm sure you were guessing it had happened, but some documentation of the fact along the way. What else? Where else are they manipulating international relations? There's so many things I wanted to share with you today, but let me get to this one, and because it's a less of a segue, I guess, and then we'll have to wrap it up for the day. We still have Friday available to us. I'm going to have to view this on AP News and let them know that I'm human. Trump's sanctions on ICC, International Criminal Court, prosecutor. We're sanctioning the ICC's prosecutors? Yes. Have halted tribunal's work. I guess everybody thought, well, the Americans are trying to not join in on the ICC and dispute its jurisdiction, but can they make it so that the place can't work against anybody else? I guess that's the option they're trying to exercise here. Molly Quell wrote this up. Let me see if I can read it into the record here before closing out for the day. Dateline The Hague. The International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor has lost access to his email and his bank accounts have been frozen. In The Hague. The Hague-based court's American staffers, there are some, have been told that if they travel to the U.S., they are American, but if they travel to the U.S., they risk arrest. Wow. I guess no different from the mayor of Newark at this point. You risk arrest. Oh, and by the way, video out just the other day of the mayor entering the detention facility and very calmly presenting himself at the gate. They open the gate for him. He walks in. Remember, that's what Dan Bishop, Congressman Dan Bishop from North Carolina, said was worse than 9/11. Can I come in? Yeah, come on in. That's odd. Anyway, some non-governmental organizations have stopped working with the ICC, and the leaders of one won't even reply to emails from court officials. Those are just some of the hurdles facing court staff since President Trump in February slapped sanctions on its chief prosecutor, Karim Khan. I guess that's easy to do if they're vaguely Muslim sounding here in the United States. You can slap sanctions on them without anybody objecting. That, according to interviews with current and former ICC officials, international lawyers, and human rights advocates. The sanctions will prevent victims from getting access to justice, says Liz Evanson, International Justice Director at Human Rights Watch. Trump sanctioned the court after a panel of ICC judges in November issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. God, said Gallant. It's pronounced that way. Yes. Judges found that there was reason to believe that the pair may have committed war crimes. They're kind of interested in that. By restricting humanitarian aid and intentionally targeting civilians in Israel's campaign against Hamas in Gaza. The Israeli officials deny it, of course. Staffers and allies of the ICC said the sanctions have made it increasingly difficult for the tribunal to conduct basic tasks, let alone seek justice for victims of war crimes or genocide. So it wasn't on behalf of the United States that Trump did this. It was on behalf of his friends in Israel. The spokesperson for the ICC and for Khan declined to comment. In February, ICC President Judge Tomoko Akane said that the sanctions constitute serious attacks against the court's states parties. Yes, I have to read that correctly. And the rule of law based on international order. Well, who cares about that? And millions of victims. And they're not us, so to hell with them. Yeah. So that's a pretty amazing development all by itself. Lots to read about in that context. And, of course, we don't get to all the details of it. But I don't know. At this point, all I can do is sort of call things out and present them to you and give you the opening paragraphs just so that you're aware. I think those things will come up in the next couple of days. We'll be talking more about it. Didn't get back around to Josh Marshall's piece over at TPM discussing under a very interesting and intriguing title. If I can get back to it quickly, hurry up. It's not going to work. Anyway, discussing the plane, and personalization. Remember the personalized regime? Personalization, the vastly bigger story behind the pimp-mobile jet bribe. I really would like to get to that. Anyway, time now, though, for us to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and to see what he's got on tap. Quickly diving into teams. A major update on the arrested Judge Dugan is discussed, remember, from Minnesota. Is that right? Do I have that right? On the rest of the menu for the day, a new law bans Oregon employers from asking for an applicant's age. How do you like that one? That and much more, of course. Let me squeeze a few in after this.
Radio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
Good stuff compiled here by Justice Putnam. A federal judge has ordered the restoration of a health monitoring program for West Virginia coal miners. Yay. And a Texas prosecutor sued to compel Border Patrol testimony in the criminal trial of the Uvalde School police chief. Wow. Bringing things in from all over the place. Stay tuned, and we'll see you tomorrow.